Hey everybody, it's Plasma95 with a rather interesting video here. I'm going to use DCS to recreate the crash of an Su-35 SM that took off from Komsomolsk on Amur for a training flight and flew by itself for 30 kilometers and then crashed. There was no loss of life, but here's the story. Basically what happened, two Su-35s were taking off for a training flight a couple of days ago, and as the two ships took off, the pilot started flaring. Now, the ground crew didn't think that that's what was happening. They actually thought that the engine caught fire. So, kind of like that. That's what would have happened if the engine had caught fire. And then you're in some trouble, so you'd probably want to steer away from the airport, steer away from somewhere where the plane would be in danger to other people, and crash it in the ground. So this is basically what they thought had happened. But what had really happened was something a little bit different. What happened is, as the plane was taking off, inside the cockpit, there is a chaff and flare dispenser, which is right there. Now what it can do is it can do an automatic dispense mode. And what happens is during takeoff, the ground-based radar at the airport was lighting up the flight of the Su-35s. And of course, while that was happening, the system detected that it was being pinged and said, okay, you know what, I'm being painted by a radar, and somehow started dispensing both chaff and flares. As that was happening, the ground controllers saw the flares and made the assumption that what was happening is the actual engine had caught fire. They reported that to one of the pilots of the airplane that was in trouble, and that pilot, during takeoff, forced an ejection. So the airplane's taking off, it's dispensing chaff, it's dispensing flares all automatically, and at that point they say, okay, something's wrong with your plane, the engine must be on fire, and the pilot executes an ejection. Now, if you don't have enough speed on the plane, that's pretty much where you would end up. No, you wouldn't end up in an F-14. That's definitely not where you would end up. But, so let's try this out. I'm going to simulate that exact same event, and I'm going to try to take off. So there we go. We've got thrust just at about maximum. I don't want to go to full afterburner. I don't know what the pilot did. We might get some information about that afterwards. But let's assume he was taking off at near afterburner. Probably the system would have started dispensing the chaff and flares somewhere around this time, and that would basically cause the ground crew to assume that there was something wrong with the plane. The pilot then pulls upwards. There's the chaff and flares kind of going off, and the pilot's being told that your plane looks like you've lost an engine, or one of your engines has caught fire. What does the pilot do? The pilot will probably at that point eject out of his or her plane. At this point, I threw up the afterburner and I ejected. So I actually recorded a voiceover here because, well, I was watching what the plane was doing, so you can't get my first-hand reaction here as the plane skyrockets towards the sky, because the roar of the engines kind of drowned out my audio level, because external observing, of course. But so there goes the plane. I'm coming down the parachutes. I'm just going to look for it here on the map and see if I can find it. And well, I ejected. The plane's in full afterburner, and I think it's decided to come and kill me, because I don't think it's happy with what I've done to it. Because yeah, it's definitely diving for me. I can see my little parachute there on the right, and well, let's see how far I can track this plane and see what this plane will do. All right, one loop, and it doesn't really care. It's an Su-27. The Su-35 SM, of course, is it's larger. It has different capabilities, different engines, different avionics, but theoretically, will this plane, just like the real one, fly for 30 kilometers, run out of fuel, and then crash into the mountainside? And then here's a picture of the actual crash site. So realistically, it kind of flattened out. It didn't actually die. So it didn't blow up because it ran out of fuel, and it just kind of nicely landed. So let's see what an Su-27 will do in that similar situation. For now, I think it's just threatening to destroy its home airbase by doing loop-de-loops. And you know what? Try doing this on an F-15 or another plane. So I'm speeding it up a little bit here to see what the heck it's going to do. Afterburner, 30% fuel, so that's about 3,000 liters on normal flight. Being conservative, that should get me about 300 kilometers. But the plane has now leveled out. It made a 180-degree turn, gained altitude to 7,000 meters while in full afterburner, and it's about to hit stall here. It's getting 190 kilometers, stalls out. The flaps are still extended because I'm assuming that's what the pilot would have done during the ejection. I don't think the pilot had time to retract the flaps since he ejected just past the airfield. But the plane doesn't care. Now, would it behave differently if it wasn't an afterburner? I don't know. I'm guessing that the integral design of the wing and the overall lift characteristics of an Su-35 SM are similar to the Su-27, where naturally, if you give it thrust and you don't trim, it will ascend. And for those of you who are flying in DCS, get your trim settings set up, because it's a lot easier than constantly pushing forwards on the stick on an Su-27, because it naturally does want to pull up, and that's how the plane is designed, really. But fly-by-wire or not, this plane is definitely flying with some sort of artificial intelligence. Stopped contrailing at above 12,000 and then dives right back down, still at 97% thrust, flaps at 100. I gotta tell you, DCS is indeed a very beautiful game. I'm gonna try to find where this plane is on the map. It's probably covered at least 50-30 kilometers by now, so realistically it should have crashed, but where's that plane? Where is my artificial intelligence drone plane? Alright, still flying along really nicely at 4 times the speed. Here accelerating nicely and just diving. It's so weird. Picks up, goes into a dive, hits about 400 kilometers an hour, levels back out 500, and then up goes the nose again. Just completely insane. Goes into a 50 degree bank, again stalls out, and then back into the dip. The dips are definitely decreasing, but we've already gotten all the way to the coast, which is about 70 kilometers ish. So it's but it's a plane that doesn't want to die. On one of the custom maps here I built up on my server, you might see it sometimes called Red Star, but I've got some, it's basically just a hot takeoff and dueling server on the blue team and red team. But this was as good a place as any to test it out. I'm just waiting for the plane to die. Okay, we've hit 30% on the thrust. So I think at this point the plane's gone bingo fuel, and there is no additional RPM. The RPMs are actually dropping. So either the engine is stalled out or it's actually out of fuel. Yep, the RPM is definitely dropping. The plane is out of fuel, dropping to 17, 16, and we're in coast mode. Alright, I think at this point it's not too loud, and let's see if I can switch back to my original audio track. Yeah, okay, that was a valiant attempt by yours truly to try to recover audio. Unfortunately, it's just like engine noise, so you won't really appreciate it. But let's watch what this plane will do. It's still cruising completely out of thrust at this point, doing some crazy pitching, but the fly-by-wire systems in the airplane are still activated because I left the avionics turned on. And I'm guessing this is what the pilot would have done as well, is when he ejected, or she, perhaps it was a she, but when he ejected, the avionics would have been left on, and the plane would have pretty much done this, where the fly-by-wire system will attempt to defeat the stall settings unless they throw it into a Cobra maneuver. But as you can see, the airplane is hitting that AOA and then tries to bank, but it can't really do much here. It tries to pitch up, loses speed. Once the speed hits about 160 kilometers an hour, the anti-stall kicks in and forces the nose back down into, there you go, about negative 10 degree dive. Again, picks up just enough speed and then pitches right back up again. From the side, you can really see what it's doing here. So this is the little bit of artificial intelligence. And the Su-27 model in DCS is much older than the Su-35 or the Su-30 that actually did crash. Not would have, but they actually did crash. So really, and also again, we can't count on DCS, as great as they are, to really recreate an artificial intelligence that's designed to fly an Su-27, or not designed to fly, but to assist the pilot flying the Su-27. But I mean, we can assume that this is something that something similar would have been installed, and it would have behaved very similarly. So again, picks up the altitude, picks up the airspeed, and then the nose pitches up, it stalls out, and then it dives back in. Now this is really interesting. Once it hit 300 kilometers an hour, now we're at just about 3 kilometers up in the air, that's about 9,000 feet. We're about 320 kilometers an hour, it's about 150 knots, or yeah, about 150 knots. The plane's actually flying level with a 1 degree, plus 1 degree, so not much, but going a heck of a ways away now, well over the Black Sea on the Caucasus map, and it's just doing its thing. I mean, I'm not controlling it, it's doing its thing. I can't see it on the map here. I'll have to make note of its latitude and longitude, and then try to reverse engineer how far it got. But 290 kilometers, cruising right along. It is dropping altitude pretty quickly, so now and the engines are still actually picking up air here. We're just getting 20% RPM. I'm not sure how that's possible, but I guess the engines are being pushed by air. And that was one of the other questions from a lot of the DCS pilots is, since the Su-27 for its electronics requires a source of electricity, how can the electronics keep running if the engines have exhausted power? Because if you've come home dead stick, you know what? Comment how far you've actually flown your Su-27 or Su-33 in DCS dead stick without fuel. But if you're coming home without any fuel, your engines are in theory off, you don't have any fuel for the onboard electricity generator, how do the electronics keep going? And this might be our answer, that as the airplane is flying, the natural pressure of the air is actually pushing the blades of the engine just enough. It looks like it's about 18-19%. As the speed is decreasing, so is the RPM in the engine. But that is actually keeping the electronics probably activated within the plane. So losing a lot of altitude here. I think we're going to come in for a graceful swan dive of a crash right into the water. And I got to track the position of the plane based on the altitude and longitude. Let's slow it down. Last 150 meters. Goodbye, plane. You've flown a heck of a distance. I'm really surprised that you did, I think, 4 loops and then turned 180 degrees and decided to fly into the ocean. Must be some sort of magical Russian AI. Let's enjoy watching this crash into madness. Here we go. Really slow this down. All right, airplane. Here we go. Hitting the water. Wave effects. Sinking. And I think that's it. I think that's it. You have served us well, airplane. Your final location is 422756 by 410826. Okay. So let me pull that up and let's see where that actually is. Let's go down to our screenshots and take a look. This is pretty incredible how far I got. At 30% fuel and full afterburner. Let's get these screenshots and let's just see here. All right. Goodbye, plane. So let's take a look on the map. The location was 42 by 41 08 26 41 10 41 25. That's close enough. That's where the plane went down. All right, so if that is where I crashed, then let's measure the distance. The airplane flew 116 kilometers. And there you go, at full afterburner, all by itself. So clearly, this could have totally happened. Well, guys, let me know if this is crazy or not, and let me know what you think about this. Cheers.